You know what I miss most about the early days of Five Nights at Freddy's? It wasn't just the scares or the mystery. It was the feeling that we were all experiencing something together for the first time. Back in 2014, the entire community was solving the same puzzle together. We didn't need 3-hour theory videos to understand what was happening. We were all listening to the same phone calls, analyzing the same posters, trying to figure out which Easter eggs were real and which were elaborate hoaxes. That was the Five Nights at Freddy's experience, in my opinion. And honestly, it was magical. Experiencing the games vicariously through Let's Plays, repeatedly listening to each phone call, analyzing each poster on the wall, looking up the Easter eggs and finding out which ones were real and which ones were total hoaxes. Now the series spans multiple decades with complex storylines involving remnant and time travel, but sometimes I wonder if we've lost something in all that complexity. When you're trying to find a story told across 10, soon to be 11 games, it becomes less about solving a mystery and more about keeping track of an ever-expanding mythology. So today I want to go back to where it all started, strip away every sequel, every book, every piece of additional context, and ask one fundamental question. What story was Scott Cawthon trying to tell with just the original Five Nights at Freddy's? Because when you really dig into it, the answer is both simpler and more terrifying than anything that came after. The game opens with a newspaper "Help Wanted" ad, and immediately something feels wrong. Freddy Fazbear's Pizza needs a night security guard to work midnight to 6, monitoring cameras and ensuring animatronic safety. But buried in that posting, almost casually, is this acknowledgement of potential injury and dismemberment, and how the company totally isn't responsible for that. What kind of family restaurant feels the need to mention dismemberment in their job listing? That's not standard corporate language. That's the kind of warning you see on industrial machinery or hazardous materials. And it tells us that whatever's been happening at Freddy's has been happening repeatedly enough that they need legal protection. There's also that blurry text around the ad, which is actually a message from Scott himself, basically saying this is probably the worst summer job ever, and recommending literally any other form of employment. Even a warehouse would be safer. It's played for laughs, but it's also setting expectations. This place is dangerous. Once you're in the security office, the state of this restaurant becomes immediately obvious. You can't move. You're trapped behind a desk with only cameras, doors, and lights for protection. This isn't just a gameplay mechanic. It's telling us something about your situation. What you see through those cameras tells a disturbing story. The entire building is falling apart. There's trash scattered everywhere, cobwebs in multiple corners, and equipment that clearly hasn't been maintained in years. The kitchen camera doesn't work at all. You can only rely on audio, which raises the question, what are they trying to hide? Pirate Cove is blocked off with an out-of-order sign, and there's a naked endoskeleton just sitting in the employees-only area, like discarded machinery. Worth noting is that you can see trash and spider webs in multiple spots throughout the pizzeria, including your own office. This isn't a thriving business. This is a place that's barely hanging on. Management has clearly given up on basic upkeep, which should tell you everything about their priorities. Then the phone rings, and we meet the character the community calls Phone Guy, our guide through this nightmare, who immediately establishes these are pre-recorded messages. He used to work your position, and he's finishing up his last week, which should probably be your first red flag. Phone Guy reads this corporate greeting that's absolutely insane. It welcomes you to this magical place for kids and grown-ups, but then casually mentions that if you die, they'll wait 90 days before filing a missing person report, and only after thoroughly cleaning and bleaching everything and replacing the carpets. 90 days? That's not just negligent, that's actively suspicious. And the emphasis on cleaning and replacing evidence first tells you exactly where Fazbear Entertainment's priorities lie. They care more about covering their tracks than reporting missing employees. But then Phone Guy drops the really big bombshell, the bite of 87. He mentions it like casual trivia. Oh yeah, someone lost their frontal lobe, but isn't it amazing the human body can live without it? You know, the frontal lobe controls personality, decision-making, motor functions. Losing it would fundamentally change who you are as a person, and Phone Guy treats it like an interesting medical fact. This tells us these characters are capable of serious damage. Phone Guy explains that the animatronics see you as a naked endoskeleton, which violates company policy, so they'll try to stuff you into a Freddy suit to fix the problem. But this explanation immediately falls apart. There's literally a naked endoskeleton sitting backstage, and the animatronics completely ignore it. So clearly that's not what's motivating them. Plus, his description of what happens when you get stuffed is disturbingly specific. Your eyeballs and teeth will pop out the front of the mask. How does he know that level of detail unless he's witnessed it happening before? Especially since the game over screen shows us this exact thing happening. Phone Guy also mentions the animatronics haven't been cleaned in 20 years, which tells us the restaurant has been open for at least that long, and explains some of the decay we're seeing. The animatronics themselves act nothing like malfunctioning robots. Bonnie and Chica wander the halls, and you can actually hear them making unsettling groaning or gasping sounds, which is particularly unnerving because mechanical beings don't make such noises. Freddy has this very deliberate movement pattern. He moves in a straight line from the show stage to the dining area, to the restrooms, to the kitchen, where his song can be heard, then to the East Hall corner, and finally your office. He laughs every time he moves, even when you're not watching the cameras. That's not random behavior, that's purposeful, almost like he's enjoying the hunt. While Bonnie and Chica can roam back and forth, and potentially never reach your office, Freddy has this fixed, aggressive path, and once he reaches the East Hall corner, there's no getting rid of him. He only moves back one space when blocked, unlike the others who return to the dining area. Foxy works completely differently from every other animatronic. If you're not checking the cameras enough, he becomes more aggressive, demanding attention like a child having a tantrum. Every time you block him with the door, he drains more and more power, so you want to minimize how many times he runs. And when any of them catch you, they stuff you into a suit. A gruesome act that matches the fate described for the missing children and seen in the game over screen. This isn't random robot behavior. This is revenge, doing to you what was done to them. Starting on night 4, Bonnie and Chica begin twitching violently when they reach your office, making the same garbled sounds you hear during hallucinations. This isn't mechanical failure. This is supernatural rage building up. The game bombards you with random audio events designed to mess with your head. Circus music, random metal pounding, Foxy singing sea shanties, but some Easter eggs contain actual story information. There are 12 different visual Easter eggs that might appear every time you open the camera. Sometimes you'll see animatronics staring directly at you. Bonnie in the backstage area, Freddy on his stage. These moments are genuinely unsettling. Posters change to show crying children, or display the words, "It's me," graffitied on walls. And most importantly, newspapers sometimes appear in the East Hall corner that tell the whole story of what happened here. These newspapers lay out a chronological sequence of events that explains everything happening in this haunted restaurant. The newspapers can change to be one of 4 different stories, and they paint a complete picture when read in order. Newspaper 1, Kids Vanish at Local Pizzeria, Bodies Not Found, describes how 2 children were lured into a back room during late hours on June 26th. Security footage identified the suspect, who was captured the next morning, but the children were never found. Police think the suspect dressed as a mascot to earn their trust. Newspaper 2, 5 children now reported missing, reveals that 5 children total are now linked to the incident. The suspect has been charged and convicted, but the bodies themselves were never found. Freddy Fazbear's Pizza has been fighting an uphill battle to convince families to return. Newspaper 3, Local pizzeria threatened with shutdown over sanitation. Details health department concerns after parents noticed blood and mucus around the animatronics' eyes and mouths. One parent compared them to reanimated carcasses. Newspaper 4, local pizzeria set to close by year's end, announces the restaurant closing after a long struggle. Despite searching for buyers, no one wants to be associated with the company. This sequence tells us everything. 5 children were murdered, their bodies were somehow connected to the animatronic suits, and now those suits are haunted by vengeful spirits. The dramatic decline in patronage explains why there's cobwebs and trash everywhere, and why management hasn't fixed Foxy. Night 2's call is shorter because, as Phone Guy says, the animatronics become more active as the week progresses. He mentions Freddy becomes more active in the dark and warns about checking Pirate Cove because Foxy doesn't like being watched. Night 3's call contains Phone Guy's strangest advice. If you get caught and want to avoid getting stuffed into a Freddy suit, try playing dead. Go limp. And maybe they'll think you're an empty costume. Then he immediately backtracks, saying they might try to stuff a metal skeleton into you instead. So, never mind, scratch that. This advice has zero gameplay applications, which makes it strange that it's the only tip he gives during this call. But it becomes important later as a clue about Golden Freddy. Night 4 is Phone Guy's final message, and it's absolutely terrifying. He says he might not be around tomorrow. It's been a bad night, and he audibly wonders what's inside the empty heads in the back room, implying his grim fate as he tries to hold out. During this call, you can actually hear all 5 animatronics in the background. Foxy banging on doors, Freddy's music box, Bonnie and Chica's groaning, and Golden Freddy's distinctive lower-pitched scream. Phone Guy gets killed by the very creatures he's been downplaying throughout the week. Night 5 somehow still has a phone call, but it's just screaming and garbled, distorted audio, the implication being you're hearing Phone Guy's death, or something equally horrible. But there's a 5th animatronic that changes everything. Golden Freddy, who appears with an incredibly rare one in 32,768 chance when you see his poster. The internal files call him Yellow Bear, but the community named him Golden Freddy. When Golden Freddy manifests, he appears directly in your office, even if both doors are closed. His mere presence forces the flashing "it's me" hallucinations. His jump scare is unique, and he doesn't send you to the game over screen. Instead, he crashes your entire game. Golden Freddy is completely absent from all other game materials. No posters, no children's drawings. Phone Guy never mentions him anywhere. It's like the restaurant is actively pretending he doesn't exist. Golden Freddy appears slumped over, completely motionless, like an empty suit. And that naked endoskeleton sitting in the backstage area, that's probably his original internal structure. The bite of 87 is only referenced twice in the entire game. Phone Guy's explanation during Night 1, and when you enter 1987 in Custom Night, which triggers Golden Freddy's jump scare. That's not coincidence, that's Scott giving us a direct clue. Golden Freddy was responsible for the bite of 87. Think about it. If one of your animatronics severely injured a customer badly enough to remove their frontal lobe, what would a company like Fazbear Entertainment do? Would they admit fault and face massive lawsuits? Or would they quietly decommission the character and pretend it never existed? They removed Golden Freddy's endoskeleton, gutted all the internal mechanisms, crossbeams, wires, and animatronic devices, and basically turned him into a wearable costume. Then they scrubbed him from all promotional materials. Years later, someone with inside knowledge about this empty suit used it to commit the perfect crime. They put on the Golden Freddy costume and used it to lure 5 children to the back room during late hours. The killer stuffed the victims into the other animatronic suits. One for Freddy, one for Bonnie, one for Chica, one for Foxy, and even one for the scrapped Golden Freddy, the very same suit used to commit the crime. But here's the crucial detail that makes this theory work. The newspapers mention blood and mucus being noticed on the suits, but bodies were never found, even during police investigation. How is that possible unless someone else got to the crime scene first and disposed of the evidence? I believe Fazbear Entertainment discovered the bodies before police arrived and made a calculated business decision. They disposed of the evidence, cleaned the scene, and let the investigation proceed without the smoking gun. Think about it. The killer commits the murders overnight, leaves 5 bodies in animatronic suits. But somehow, by the next morning, when police investigate based on surveillance footage, there are no bodies to be found, despite clear signs of violence. The company that casually mentions dismemberment in job ads, that waits 90 days before reporting missing employees, that prioritizes cleaning and bleaching over investigation, they absolutely would cover up murders to avoid massive liability. This explains their cavalier attitude toward employee safety, their constant corporate doublespeak, and their established pattern of avoiding responsibility at every turn. Here's how I think everything really happened, based purely on evidence from the original game. Early 1980s, Freddy Fazbear's Pizza opens, featuring revolutionary animatronics that can walk around and interact directly with customers. This innovation makes them incredibly popular. 1987. Golden Freddy gets too close to a customer during daytime operation and causes the bite of 87, removing their frontal lobe. Management immediately decommissions Golden Freddy and restricts all animatronics to nighttime operation only. They remove his endoskeleton, gut all internal mechanisms, and effectively turn him into a wearable costume. Then they scrub all references to him from promotional materials, posters, and children's drawings. Early to mid-1990s, someone with inside knowledge possibly an employee, uses the empty golden Freddy suit to commit multiple murders. They lure 5 children to the back room on June 26th and kill them. The killer stuffs the bodies into the animatronic suits, including the golden Freddy costume they used for the murders, creating 5 haunted animatronics total. Fazbear Entertainment discovers the crime scene before police arrive and makes the decision to dispose of evidence. They remove the bodies, clean the scene, and tamper with any remaining footage. Police investigate the next morning, find surveillance showing someone in a mascot costume luring children away, but can't find the actual bodies. The killer is caught and convicted, but the company avoids the massive liability that would come with 5 murdered children found on their property. The restaurant struggles with reputation issues and health department concerns as the haunted animatronics begin showing signs of supernatural decay. Blood and mucus appear around their eyes and mouths. Fazbear Entertainment fights to stay open, but eventually announces closure by year's end. The building falls into disrepair. Trash accumulates, Foxy breaks down, and gets marked out of order. A senior employee takes the night security position, while management searches for applicants. This person records warning messages for whoever takes the job, trying to help them survive without directly admitting company fault. This temporary night guard gets killed by the haunted animatronics during his final week. You can hear it happening during the night for a phone call, with all 5 animatronics audible in the background. Mike Schmidt takes the job, armed with phone guy's pre-recorded warnings, and somehow survives the full week. He even comes back for overtime, showing remarkable dedication or desperation. But management doesn't appreciate employees who are too observant, who might start asking uncomfortable questions about why so many night guards disappear or what's really happening at the restaurant. They fire him for tampering with animatronics, general unprofessionalism, and odor. Even though custom night shows you get fired regardless of your actual performance, suggesting the firing was predetermined. The restaurant closes shortly after, as planned, and Mike Schmidt becomes the last person to work at the original Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. This interpretation accounts for every piece of evidence in the game, using only information available in the original release. Golden Freddy's complete absence from promotional materials makes perfect sense if he was quietly decommissioned after causing a liability incident. The company's casual attitude toward employee death and their emphasis on cleaning before investigation makes sense if they've been covering up murders for years. The spirit's behavior makes sense as supernatural revenge against the company that failed to protect them and then covered up their deaths. Phone Guy's disturbingly specific knowledge about what happens when you get stuffed suggests he's witnessed it happening before. The corporate emphasis on cleaning, bleaching, and replacing carpets before reporting deaths reveals their true priorities. Fazbear Entertainment isn't just negligent, they're actively malicious, prioritizing profits over human lives and covering up evidence when those deaths threaten their bottom line. What makes this story genuinely terrifying isn't jump scares or creepy robots. It's the very human evil of corporate greed, disguised as family entertainment. 5 children died because a company prioritized profits over safety, and when those deaths threatened their bottom line, they covered it up, disposed of evidence, and continued operating. Even in death, these children can't find peace because the truth died with them. The company that should have protected them became their final enemy. Fazbear Entertainment represents something genuinely frightening, the banality of evil in corporate form. They're not cartoonish villains. They're a business making calculated decisions about acceptable losses. Before Five Nights at Freddy's became a multimedia franchise about time travel and sci-fi concepts, it was a simple story about corporate negligence and supernatural justice. The horror works on multiple levels. Surface level scares from killer robots, but underneath, a much darker tale about companies that treat human lives as expendable resources. This is what Scott Cawthon created in 2014. A horror story that feels real, because companies like Fazbear Entertainment exist in our world, making the same calculations every day. The original Five Nights at Freddy's told a complete, self-contained story about dead children seeking revenge against the company that failed them. When you strip away all the sequels and expanded universe, what you're left with is pure horror, not because of jump scares, but because of the very human capacity for evil in pursuit of profit. That's the truth of Five Nights at Freddy's. A story about 5 children who never got justice and the adults who made sure they never would. This analysis represents my interpretation, using only evidence from the original game. I believe this captures what Scott originally intended. A horror story that works because it feels possible, because we live in a world where corporations regularly choose profits over people and cover up their mistakes. Well, that is the truth of Five Nights at Freddy's. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to subscribe.